Welcome to Top Stories Hub. Today we've got a new story, a mystery you'll want to unravel. I'd finally pulled it off. After 4 grueling years of pouring my heart, soul, and endless effort into my dream, I stood at the peak of achievement. At a dazzling gala thrown to celebrate my success, I was enveloped by the glow of sparkling chandeliers, the rhythm of lively music, and the buzz of admiring voices. The tiny shop I'd started from scratch, built with my own 2 hands, had grown into a multimillion-dollar powerhouse. It felt surreal to realize that a simple food venture, born from modest roots and fierce determination, had become a national name, raking in $9.5 million annually. Every detail of the night, the clink of elegant champagne flutes, the warm shine of genuine praise, brought back memories of the sleepless nights and relentless challenges that led me to this triumphant moment. Right in the heart of the crowd, Michael Thompson, my primary investor from Horizon Ventures, lifted his glass high, his gaze brimming with sincere respect and a touch of pride. His voice boomed with clarity and conviction. "Here's to Ethan Parker, the guy who showed the world that grit outshines privilege every single time." The applause that erupted was deafening, reverberating through the opulent hall. I shook hands, flashed polite smiles, and soaked in the evening's joy, each kind word feeling like a salute to my unyielding perseverance, a confirmation of every sacrifice I'd made to bring my vision to life. I should have been over the moon, completely wrapped up in the moment. But then, amid the whirl of chatter and clinking glasses, a cold wave seemed to ripple through the air. My wife, Emily, leaned in so close I could see every nuance of her expression. In a moment that dragged on like forever, she whispered 5 words that crushed the core of my victory: "Your brother, my new partner, will take charge. Love you." Those words struck me like a thunderbolt, stopping my heart cold. My brain scrambled to process what she'd just said. Was she seriously claiming that my younger brother, Ryan, who'd spent the last 2 years living it up in Europe, squandering our family's money, and basking in carefree luxury, was now her lover and the one set to seize control of everything I'd built? I gaped at her, stunned, my mind desperately hunting for a hint of a joke or some cruel prank, but her eyes held no trace of humor or irony, just a serene, chilling certainty that left no room for doubt. The cheers from the crowd, the warm handshakes, and the nods of approval suddenly felt like faint echoes, drowned out by the overwhelming silence that gripped my heart. The sweetness of my triumph turned bitter as I grappled with the betrayal. How could Emily, the one person I'd trusted above all, the partner I thought stood by me through every storm, so casually toss aside everything we'd created together? In that fleeting moment, as the warmth of the celebration morphed into the sharp chill of deceit, I knew nothing would ever be the same. I'd built this company from the ground up, pouring every ounce of my passion and energy into every deal, every detail, every late-night struggle. I could still picture those early days so vividly. I'd rise before the sun, logging countless hours behind a counter or hunched over a desk, mapping out each move with meticulous care. Back then, I was certain Emily was right there with me, step for step. I had absolute faith in her, believing we were a team forged by love and a shared dream. For years, I'd toiled over contracts, slashed costs, and burned the midnight oil, while she enjoyed the luxuries my success provided. I was convinced she cared about our future, that she was as devoted to our shared life as I was. But as time went on and my hard work bore fruit, I started to notice a shift. I began to see that while I was drowning in work, she seemed to drift further from the grind of our daily life. I'd given everything to transform a modest food business into a multimillion-dollar empire, yet a growing gap formed between us. I'd come home, drained from the stress of scaling the company, only to find her smiling, relaxed, and sometimes even detached. It stung to realize she was living a life of comfort, surrounded by luxuries my blood and sweat had earned, yet she never seemed to carry the weight of my struggles. Then there was Ryan, my younger brother, who'd never been one for hard work, always taking more than his share of the family's resources without lifting a finger. While I fought to turn every obstacle into a win, he was off indulging in reckless escapades, flitting from one high-end resort to another across Europe. I often wondered if he even gave a damn about what I'd built. He'd never contributed a thing to the business, yet here he was, thrust into the spotlight by Emily's offhand, cutting remark. It was during a hushed moment at one of our celebratory dinners that Emily first brought him up, her tone light in a way that masked the weight of her words. She said, "Ryan's got a new angle. You're too consumed, Ethan. He'll bring some equilibrium." Those words hit like a bucket of ice water. Equilibrium? How could she say that when he contributed nothing, not a single drop of effort or a single idea that moved our company forward? Her words sank in, each one chipping away at the trust and commitment I thought we shared. It felt like the woman I'd married, the one I thought I knew inside and out, was choosing a life of ease and reckless upheaval over the years we'd spent building something real together. That night is etched in my memory. I raised my glass to clink with Michael's, forcing a smile that barely hid the chaos brewing inside me. Every word of praise and every admiring glance from investors felt empty. Deep down, I was questioning everything, my decisions, my sacrifices, even the love I thought we had. I'd worked relentlessly, day in and day out, to create something meaningful, an empire that stood as proof of my dedication, and now it seemed she was ready to hand it all over to someone who'd never lifted a finger to help. The betrayal cut deep, slicing into my very core. I spent the rest of that night in a fog of shock and anger, replaying her words over and over in my head. I kept wondering how I'd missed the signs, how the woman I loved could so effortlessly dismiss all the pain and effort I'd poured out. Every memory of late nights at the office, every deal I'd fought for, was now overshadowed by her cold indifference. It felt like the woman I'd married, the one I'd trusted with my whole heart, had chosen a path that not only shattered our shared dreams but also undermined everything I'd built. I sat alone for hours after the party, the silence around me mirroring the void in my chest. I wondered if I'd been blind to her true feelings, if I'd given up too much chasing success. The weight of her betrayal crushed me, forcing me to face the gut-wrenching truth that our marriage was falling apart. In that dark, quiet moment, I saw that the effort I'd sunk into my business was now intertwined with the agony of personal loss. I started to question if the sacrifices were worth it, if the person I trusted most could turn her back so easily. This betrayal, subtle but razor-sharp, left me at a crossroads, torn between holding tight to what I'd built and facing a future that might be lonelier than the present. Sitting there, the taste of success turned sour. I knew moving forward meant grappling with the harsh reality of my personal life while fighting to preserve the legacy I'd created. The man I'd trusted was gone, replaced by someone whose ideas and promises felt as hollow as the cheers that once celebrated our dreams. My heart ached as I realized that equilibrium she spoke of wasn't about fairness or growth, it was a surrender of everything I'd worked so hard to achieve. The night dragged on, endless and heavy, a stark reminder that sometimes success comes at a devastating personal cost, leaving you alone with the echoes of a broken dream. I lingered in my darkened office long after the party, the bitterness of betrayal still sharp on my tongue. The quiet of the night was pierced only by the faint hum of the city beyond my window and the frantic thud of my heart. I just replayed Emily's shocking message, her words ringing in my mind like a curse. "Ryan and I discussed it. We think it's time for a change. You need to step back, Ethan." My fists clenched, a wave of anger and pain surging through me. I knew I had to take action. I couldn't let my empire, forged through 4 brutal years of relentless effort and sleepless nights, be stolen by those I'd once loved and trusted. In that moment, I vowed to plot my comeback with the same precision and fire I'd used to build my business from nothing. I started pacing the room, my head buzzing with ideas and tactics. Each step on the cold, polished floor reminded me I was now fighting for everything I'd poured my life into. I knew I had to be sharp and strategic. I grabbed my phone and dialed the few people who'd stood by me through every storm: James, my rock-solid CFO, who handled every dollar with ruthless precision; Sarah, the brilliant head of operations, whose strategic mind cut like a blade; and Olivia, my lead strategist, whose ideas had often guided us through the darkest times. I needed to rally them, share my plan, and gear up for the battle ahead. As I laid out my strategy, each word felt like a plunge into a world where trust was broken, and loyalty was a rare commodity. I told them this betrayal wasn't just personal, it threatened everything we'd built together. I explained how Emily's casual dismissal of our shared vision and her sudden allegiance to Ryan, my brother who'd never lifted a finger, forced me to act before they could tear down my legacy. Their stunned expressions and quiet nods showed they felt the sting of betrayal too. They were on board. I wouldn't let my hard-won success slip away without a fight. We started crafting two plans side by side. The first was to solidify my place in the company. I'd prove to every investor and partner that I was the irreplaceable force they'd backed. I spent hours digging into numbers, carefully compiling data that showed my decisions had driven over 520% revenue growth, how my bold risks led to over 350 store expansions, and how every move had fortified our empire. I'd demonstrate that every contract inked, every deal sealed, came from my grit and determination. There was no space for someone with zero experience, someone who'd spent 2 years gallivanting across Europe, to step in. The second plan, riskier and more ruthless, was to prepare for a possible hostile takeover. If Emily and Ryan succeeded in pushing me out, I'd walk away with everything I'd earned, leaving them with a hollow shell of a company. I'd pull every financial string, persuade investors to pull their support, and dismantle the empire piece by piece, ensuring they'd inherit nothing. I mapped out every step in my mind, picturing this counterattack. My anger fueled every choice, every calculated gamble. I knew revenge was a double-edged sword, but I'd learned long ago that in a world where betrayal hid behind every smile, I had to be relentless to survive. As the hours ticked by, my strategy took sharper shape in my mind. I pictured myself facing Ryan head-on, laying bare his incompetence in a boardroom where every gaze would pin him down. I could see the investors' expressions shift as they grasped the depth of his shortcomings. I imagined Emily's stunned reaction as her carefully spun story unraveled bit by bit. Each envisioned response only fueled my determination further. The thought of channeling my anguish into strength, of using this betrayal as the spark to launch my comeback, felt almost freeing. I no longer viewed myself as a casualty, I saw myself as a fighter, resolute in taking back what was rightfully mine. In the faint glow of my office, with the harsh truth of betrayal closing in, I made a quiet pledge: I wouldn't let my empire fall apart. I'd battle with every bit of my cunning and every drop of my strength. That night, the roots of my revenge were planted, and I was primed to reap them in a whirlwind of justice. Every tactic, every meticulously planned move, was a commitment to myself that I'd prove to everyone, especially Emily and Ryan, that no one could snatch away what I'd built. The night loomed long and oppressive, but a spark flared within me. I wasn't the man who'd basked in triumph at a gala anymore, I was now the man orchestrating his ultimate return, ready to redefine the terms of loyalty and control. I set up a clandestine meeting with Horizon Ventures in a hushed boardroom at a luxurious hotel. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation as Michael and the key investors gathered around a sleek, polished table. I sat at the head, gripping a hefty folder tightly. Each page inside was a testament to 4 grueling years of tireless effort, undeniable proof of the empire I'd raised from nothing. I knew whispers of a supposed leadership switch had spread like wildfire, and I needed to convince them, beyond any doubt, that my work had shaped this company into what it was. My pulse raced as I started speaking, my voice calm despite the storm churning inside. I kicked off with the raw numbers. Our revenue had surged by over 52% under my guidance, and our once tiny food business had grown to over 350 stores across the country. Every figure was a reminder of the nights spent poring over spreadsheets, the endless calls, and the deals clinched in the stillness of dawn. I kept my word straightforward, trusting the truth didn't need any polish. As I went on, I noticed the faces around me soften, shifting from doubt to guarded respect. I highlighted the strategic alliances I'd secured and the optimistic forecasts that promised a thriving future for our brand. With every sentence, I underscored that this company was forged through grit, sacrifice, and relentless effort. Then, I pulled out a final piece of evidence to silence any lingering skepticism. I slowly slid a single blank sheet across the table, locked eyes with each investor, and said with unwavering clarity, this sums up Ryan's contributions. For a moment, the room was still, the only sound the soft ticking of a wall clock, each second marking their absorption of my point. Michael's lips curled into a half-smirk as he said, "You're playing to win, aren't you?" His tone was probing, testing my conviction. I didn't flinch. "I don't play," I responded simply. "I make sure I come out on top." My words weren't just talk, they were a vow. I made it crystal clear that if Emily and Ryan tried to force me out, the funding would dry up faster than it had appeared. I reminded them their trust and capital were tied to my vision and hard work. I spoke of the countless grueling days and sleepless nights that had turned a modest idea into a multimillion-dollar powerhouse. I stressed that the blank sheet wasn't just paper, it was a glaring symbol of Ryan's complete lack of contribution, a testament to his failure to achieve even one meaningful success. In that electric moment, the investors started to see the reality behind my words. Their gazes shifted, their faces relaxed, and a rising tide of respect filled the room. I painted a vivid vision of the future, one where leadership was earned through commitment, not handed out on a whim. I explained that change is part of any business, but change without merit was a recipe for disaster. I told them the empire we'd built together couldn't thrive on hollow promises or unearned roles. Every slide in my presentation, every deliberately chosen word, was designed to hammer home that my leadership was the cornerstone of our success. I laid out each milestone, leaving no question that the growth, expansion, and strategic direction were mine alone. I made it plain that while others might chase shortcuts or push untested visions without the grind, I'd shouldered the burden of every choice. The room fell quiet as I wrapped up, and I could feel the investors fully grasping the weight of the truth. The evidence was ironclad. They started nodding, whispering their agreement, realizing their investments were secure as long as I was in charge. Michael leaned forward, his earlier smirk replaced by genuine respect, and said, "Ethan, we backed you, not just the company. We believed in your drive and your vision." That was the pivotal moment. The first blow wasn't physical but a deliberate, calculated statement that my work was unmatched. I walked out of that meeting with my head high, knowing I'd sent a loud and clear message to Emily and Ryan. The empire I'd crafted with my own hands was mine to defend, and I was ready to fight for every inch of it. The investors were solidly in my corner, and as I left that room, the sting of betrayal began to ease, replaced by a fierce new resolve. I knew the fight was far from over, but right then, I'd taken the first critical step toward reclaiming my future. My determination was unshakable, and nothing would stop me from safeguarding what was mine. The night had grown dark as I left my office, my mind still ablaze with strategies and plans. I drove slowly through the silent city streets, the weight of the day's choices heavy in my chest. I knew that even with the investors' support, a tempest was brewing, one that would push my resolve to the limit and demand I prove my worth again. I reached my apartment building and paused at the entrance, a mix of fury and determination coursing through me. Emily's betrayal still burned, but I'd turned that pain into fuel. Every step I took was deliberate, every breath a promise to myself that I wouldn't let my empire slip away. The next morning, the city stirred with its usual rhythm, oblivious to the currents churning beneath its calm facade. Heading to a private dinner at a high-end restaurant, I sensed everything was about to shift. Word had spread that Ryan was back in town, strutting like he'd earned a hero's welcome, as if his time away had made him a victor. I sat at a long table in a secluded room, my eyes locked on the entrance. The air felt charged with a silent warning that things were about to change forever. Ryan strolled in, exuding confidence, his loud laughter filling the room as he greeted old contacts. Dressed impeccably, his smile was bold and careless, and he moved like he'd already won against me. I watched from across the room, my stomach twisting with anger and disbelief. It was tough to accept that my own brother, who'd spent 2 years aimlessly drifting through Europe without purpose or effort, now thought he could step into my role. His laughter sounded empty to me, each guffaw a reminder of the countless hours I'd slaved to build something from nothing. As the dinner kicked off and courses arrived one after another, I kept my focus on Ryan. He worked the room, spinning grand tales of his recent escapades and his so-called fresh perspective. I barely registered his words, my mind racing through the plans I'd laid out hours earlier. I'd already set moves in motion to ensure his takeover bid was nothing but a pipe dream. While he bragged about his lavish lifestyle, I'd been burning the midnight oil to lock down every aspect of my business, making sure every investor knew who really held the reins. Emily was there too, her face glowing with a confidence I now saw as misguided. She glided among the guests with a poise that made her seem like the evening's true star. Her eyes met mine now and then, and for a split second, I thought I caught a glimmer of regret, but her calm, steady smile returned, as if she genuinely believed passing the torch to Ryan was the right call. Her earlier words echoed in my head, and I couldn't shake the sense that she'd made her choice long ago. Her faith in Ryan's so-called equilibrium felt like a betrayal of everything we'd built side by side. I sipped my drink slowly, the taste of fine champagne doing little to dull the bitterness welling inside me. The gentle clink of ice in my glass was a constant reminder of the cold reality unfolding. Sitting there, I started picturing the future in vivid detail, Ryan, with his empty promises and shallow drive, floundering in the complex world of our business, Emily, caught in a fantasy of what might have been if she'd chosen differently, and me, forced to fight not just for my company but for my very sense of self. The idea of letting them win was unthinkable. I'd built my empire brick by brick, tackling every obstacle head-on, and I wouldn't let it collapse over one reckless decision. Every element of the evening seemed to mirror my inner turmoil. The restaurant's lights were dimmed just enough to create an intimate bubble, a place where secrets could be whispered and destinies decided. As the dinner went on, I tuned in closely to the conversations around me, picking up every stray comment that might reveal a crack in Ryan's position. I noticed some guests exchanging doubtful glances when he tossed out big ideas with no substance. Those moments sparked a rush of validation. My carefully crafted plans were starting to take hold, and I could almost see the instant when every investor would finally recognize that my leadership was the heart of our success. I leaned back in my chair, letting my mind drift to the strategic steps I'd already put in place. I'd built financial models, compiled key performance metrics, and reached out to key partners, all to guarantee that any move to push me out would be met with a swift, calculated counter. The more I reflected, the clearer it became that this storm wasn't just about a family betrayal or a petty power grab, it was about the core of what it meant to create something real with your own hands. I wasn't about to let the reckless actions of those who'd never earned their place shape the future of the empire I'd built. As the night wound down, the storm outside seemed to echo the turmoil in my heart, a gathering tempest that promised to upend everything. I rose from the table and left the restaurant with quiet resolve, Ryan's laughter fading behind me. I knew the days ahead would test every bit of my strength and determination, and the fight for control was just beginning. In that moment, I made a silent oath, no matter what came next, I'd battle to the end, reclaiming every piece of what was mine. The storm was closing in, and I was ready to meet it head-on. Monday morning hit with a thick, almost stifling vibe as I headed to the conference room where everything was set to shift. The boardroom, typically a hub for cool-headed strategy sessions, now felt like a gladiator's arena. I stepped inside and spotted Emily next to Ryan, her smile tight and her eyes gleaming with a boldness that teetered on arrogance. Ryan lounged beside her, his expression smug, his posture radiating a sense of unearned superiority. It was obvious they were convinced this meeting would mark my ousting from the company I'd poured my heart, soul, and countless hours into building. Taking my place at the sleek, polished table, I felt every gaze in the room lock onto me. The tension was electric, with the soft hum of nervous investors' whispers filling the background. I sat calmly, fully aware that the next few minutes would determine the future of my empire. Then, the door swung open, and Michael Thompson strode in with a group of key investors, their purposeful steps and steely expressions signaling they were ready for answers and meant business. Emily rose to welcome them, her tone polished and practiced as she started, "Thanks for being here. We're thrilled to talk about the leadership change." Her words were cut short by a sharp, commanding voice slicing through the room. "There's no change happening," Michael stated, his voice cold and unwavering. A stunned hush fell over the room. Emily blinked, her carefully built confidence faltering for the first time, while Ryan's cocky grin faded into a look of disbelief. In that intense moment, I knew I had everyone's undivided attention. I drew a deep breath and clicked to the next slide of my presentation, my hand steady despite the fierce pounding of my heart. The screen lit up with stark, undeniable facts. Ryan's work experience was bluntly listed as 0, no contracts signed, no deals closed, no contributions whatsoever. The slide went on to highlight his complete lack of impact, set against the staggering successes we'd achieved under my leadership, soaring revenue, nationwide store growth, and pivotal milestones that formed the core of our company's strength. I scanned the room, locking eyes with each investor in turn. We put our faith in results, in dedication, in the tireless chase for greatness, I said. Strip that away, swap it for hollow promises, and what's left? Just a name with no weight behind it. My words lingered, sparking looks of clarity and unease among the investors. Emily's once assured face paled as she fumbled for a response, while Ryan squirmed in his seat, his earlier swagger reduced to silence. Michael picked up where I left off, his tone steady but firm. We backed Ethan, not just the Parker name. We believed in his vision and his track record. This company stands on a foundation of proven wins, not untested theories. I could sense the silent agreement in the room, a shared recognition that my efforts were the true engine of our success. The faint scratch of pens on paper and the low buzz of investors murmuring filled the space. I pushed forward, outlining the milestones that had turned a small startup into a multimillion-dollar juggernaut. Every number and stat was proof of the grueling nights and relentless drive that had shaped our path. I turned to Ryan directly, my voice even as I challenged him, tell me one deal you've sealed. Name a single contract you've signed. What real results have you brought to the table? The silence that followed was crushing. Even Emily averted her gaze, unable to face me as the weight of her choice hit home. In that moment, it hit me that this fight wasn't just about keeping control of a company, it was about defending the truth of what it means to earn success. I'd built this empire with my own hands, and every achievement was carved into the data flashing before us. The investors' support was now crystal clear, they saw the reality of my work and knew that a vague promise of a new perspective couldn't hold a candle to my proven record of grit. As the meeting wrapped up, the room stayed hushed, everyone digesting the irrefutable evidence I'd laid out. That silence was a stark reminder that loyalty and hard work couldn't be swapped for fleeting charisma or undeserved ambition. I left the boardroom that day with a steely resolve and a loud message to those who doubted me, I wasn't going anywhere. The boardroom showdown was over, and with it came the unshakable truth that my leadership was the only force capable of guiding our company to new heights. Victory tasted bittersweet, tinged with the sharp pain of betrayal, but it was a win all the same, a win earned through relentless commitment and an unyielding drive for excellence. In the stillness that followed the boardroom clash, I found myself alone, weighed down by a silence so heavy it pressed against my chest. The echoes of the confrontation lingered in my mind as I returned to my office, once a haven but now a battlefield littered with the debris of shattered trust. I sank into my chair, my hands shaking as I replayed every moment of that critical meeting, the stark numbers on the screen, the investors' stunned silence, and the creeping despair that spread across Emily's face. It was done, I realized, at least for now. The betrayal had been laid bare for all to see, and though I protected my empire, the fallout left wounds that wouldn't heal easily. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and endless hours of soul-searching. As I walked the halls of my company, each step carried the weight of every choice I'd made. Every corner reminded me of the faith I'd once placed in those closest to me. The boardroom triumph had been sweet, but it came at a steep price, not in money or deals, but in the loss of what I'd believed was unshakable loyalty. I sought comfort in the numbers on my computer, the spreadsheets and projections that had always been my steady allies. But behind every figure, I saw flashes of late nights spent charting the company's future, conversations brimming with hope and promises that now felt empty. Calls and emails from investors started pouring in, praising my bold stand, but their words felt far off, like I was living someone else's story. I started to wonder if I'd been so driven to prove myself that I'd lost track of the personal toll this fight had taken. Each message of support was a reminder that I was winning the battle, but the peace I'd expected remained out of reach. I'd catch fleeting glimpses of Emily in the hallways, a quick flash of regret in her eyes, a brief pause before she rushed off, and I wondered if she, too, was haunted by what we'd become. Alone in my office, I kept replaying the moment she dropped those 5 crushing words that shattered everything I'd held dear. Her voice had been so calm, almost indifferent, as if she were mentioning a trivial matter instead of tearing apart our shared dreams. That detached tone made the betrayal cut even deeper. I turned to my loyal team, James, Sarah, and Olivia, not just for guidance on what came next but for the solace of the shared purpose that had tied us together through the years. We gathered in a small, softly lit conference room, our faces heavy with the weight of recent events. As we spoke, our talk moved from business tactics to the deeper scars left by this betrayal. James, whose calm voice had always been a lifeline in tough times, reminded me that the biggest wins often demand the heaviest sacrifices. Sarah, ever practical, stressed the need to rebuild not only the business but also the trust fractured by personal agendas and misplaced loyalties. Olivia, with her quiet fire, simply said, "We have to keep pushing forward, or everything we've built will fall apart." Her words struck a chord, not as a call to bury the past, but as a challenge to rise above it. In the weeks that followed, I dove into documents, double-checking every detail of our financial models to ensure every decision was backed by solid, indisputable facts. I couldn't let the bitterness of betrayal cloud my thinking, even as it gnawed at my resolve. I started noticing subtle shifts in the company's vibe, wary glances in the corridors, a tension that hadn't existed before. It felt like the very foundation of our empire was quaking, unsure of what lay ahead. Clients and partners, once full of confidence, now seemed to hold their breath, waiting for my next move, questioning if the leadership they trusted was still rock solid. One long evening, sitting alone in my office with the city lights sparkling outside, I let myself face the raw emotions I'd kept buried. I thought about the countless sleepless nights, the sacrifices made in the name of success, and the relationships that had become casualties of my relentless drive for greatness. I recalled the moments when Emily and I had dreamed of a bright future together, promising to stand side by side no matter what. Now, those vows lay broken on the cold ground of reality, leaving me to gather the fragments. The fury I'd felt in the boardroom had morphed into a profound, gnawing grief. I couldn't stop wondering if the cost of my triumph was too steep when it meant losing love and trust. As weeks stretched from days, I stood at a fork in the road. Sure, I'd locked down my role, but the fight had left me emotionally wrecked, questioning what success even meant after battling so hard for it. In still moments, I grappled with whether I'd ever trust fully again, whether the scars of betrayal would ever fade. That day's fallout had reshaped me forever, and I knew nothing would ever feel the same. I'd come out on top in the boardroom, but the personal price tagged along like a silent shadow. I started to see that real success wasn't just about profits or market dominance, it was rooted in the strength of the bonds behind every deal and decision. The sting of betrayal was a harsh wake-up call that even the mightiest empires could collapse if their foundations were cracked by broken trust. Ultimately, I decided to embrace the hard lessons from this painful chapter. I swore to rebuild not just my company but also the loyalty and trust that ambition and deception had chipped away. I knew the path forward would be long and littered with obstacles, but I also saw every stumble as a chance to craft a tougher, more enduring future. Betrayal had left its marks, but it had also shown me the value of staying true to who I am, of prizing hard-won achievements over empty pledges. So, with a heavy heart but a fierce resolve, I braced myself for the next leg of my journey, understanding that while the wounds might never fully close, they'd remind me of the steep price of trust and the grit it takes to rise again. I woke one morning with a sinking feeling, like a storm was about to unleash chaos, confirming my deepest fears. Sensing Ryan's desperation that day, I got a call that sent my stomach plummeting. A supplier reported strange orders and abrupt cancellations, hinting that Ryan, in a final spiteful act, was trying to sabotage our business. Sitting at my desk, My thoughts raced as I recalled the countless times my loyal team and I had poured everything into securing every contract, every deal, every partnership. Now, my own brother was hell-bent on tearing it all apart with one last reckless stunt. I immediately dialed James, Sarah, and Olivia to dig into the details and kickstart a response plan. Over the phone, I learned Ryan had been contacting suppliers, pretending to offer new deals only to yank them at the last second. Worse, he was stirring unrest among our staff, spreading doubts about my leadership and hinting at a brighter future under his so-called vision. The betrayal cut deeper now, not just because of the business fallout, but because I'd clung to the hope that family ties would stop us from such vicious moves. I knew I had to act fast. I headed straight to the warehouse and called a meeting with our core team. Speaking with a calm but firm tone, I laid out that someone was trying to mess with our supply chain and made it clear we wouldn't tolerate threats to our company's stability. Their eyes showed worry, but also a fierce resolve. Years of working together had taught them our power came from standing united and knowing what it truly took to thrive. Leaving the warehouse, I was hit with a mix of rage and sadness. I thought back to all the times Ryan had lived a cushy life, far removed from the grind of building something meaningful. Now, his jealousy had pushed him to make a desperate, final grab for what he'd never worked for. That afternoon, I sat down with Michael and a few top investors at a quiet cafe. I broke down the situation plainly. Ryan was sneaking behind our backs to weaken our trusted partnerships. I presented proof of his calls to suppliers and the messages I'd caught, which aimed to turn our employees against the company. Their expressions turned grim as they processed the gravity of Ryan's underhanded tactics. One investor, who'd stayed quiet until now, leaned forward and asked, "Ethan, how can we be certain this is all Ryan's doing?" I responded with calm conviction, "The evidence speaks for itself. He's got no track record, no successful deals to his name. His every move is reckless, designed to harm us. I've got timestamps, call logs, and even recordings of his conversations. This isn't what someone who cares about our company does." Their nods of agreement fueled my resolve. I directed Michael to personally reach out to our major suppliers, reassuring them of our unwavering commitment and clarifying that any sudden order changes or false claims were the work of an outsider with no business savvy. I also called a meeting with my managers, stressing the need for transparency. I urged them to flag any odd activity and report directly to me if they spotted signs of further sabotage attempts. As evening rolled in, I got word that one of our biggest suppliers had taken my call and confirmed they'd stick with us, brushing off Ryan's confusing messages. That small win sparked a flicker of hope, reinforcing my belief that our company's strength was rooted in the trust we'd built through years of hard work. Later that night, alone in my office, I sifted through the day's events. The proof was undeniable. Ryan's actions were not just desperate but downright foolish. His attempts to stir discontent among our employees had been shut down by loyal team members who valued the long hours, dedication, and honesty I'd always brought to the table. I could almost picture Ryan's face, contorted with frustration as he realized his schemes were crumbling. Taking a deep breath, I drafted a message to send to all our partners and suppliers, affirming that our company's course was steady and that any unauthorized communications should be ignored. I kept the tone clear, heartfelt, and direct. In that moment, it hit me that this wasn't just about saving the business, it was about protecting the integrity and trust that had defined everything we'd built together. As the night deepened, I kept working, reaching out to more contacts to ensure no further disruptions took hold. Every call, every meeting, every word of support from a trusted partner strengthened my determination. I knew Ryan's moves, though damaging, couldn't erase the years of commitment that had solidified our place in the market. In the quiet of my office, with the city's glow outside and the faint hum of activity around me, I felt a blend of sorrow and grit. It pained me that my own brother could turn so bitter and destructive, yet I was steadfast in my mission to defend what we'd created. I made a silent vow to not only stop Ryan's final, reckless act but also ensure no betrayal could ever again threaten the legacy we'd worked so hard to build. With every keystroke and every carefully placed call, I reinforced our company's future, certain that loyalty, hard work, and truth would always outshine empty promises and reckless ambition. Sitting alone in my study that evening, the city's soft hum a distant whisper beyond the windows, I reflected on the weight of the day's events. They settled over me like a heavy blanket, pulling me into deep thought about the long, tough road that had brought me here. I'd fought back with every tool I had, data, strategy, sheer will, and I'd won the boardroom battle, thwarted Ryan's desperate ploys, and held on to the trust of my investors. But as I stared at the blank pages of my notebook, a new question crept in: what had I really gained, and what had it cost me? I'd always thought success was about the numbers, the growth percentages, the millions in revenue, the hundreds of stores. But in that quiet room, I saw the true price wasn't financial, it was the loss of trust, love, and the shared dreams that once tied me to those around me. I thought back to the late nights planning a future with Emily, the promises we'd made, the warmth of a life built on mutual sacrifice. All that was gone now, replaced by cold realities and hard-fought victories. I realized that in the scramble for power, I'd lost sight of what mattered most. Emily's betrayal cut deeper than any business setback. I'd built this empire through sweat and sacrifice, but her decision to side with my brother left me feeling utterly alone. I started questioning whether I'd ever truly known the woman I married or if my ambition had blinded me. In the stillness of that study, I recalled her soft laughter before the gala, the quiet moments of connection we'd shared, the small acts of care that felt so genuine. Now, those memories were overshadowed by the harsh truth of her betrayal and the painful lessons forged in the heat of conflict. Yet, as I sifted through the wreckage of what was once a cherished life, I also saw the strength that hardship had carved into me. The raw pain of loss had taught me that trust and loyalty were delicate, easily shattered by a single careless word. I understood that my hard-earned success had come at a steep personal cost, but it had also shown me the importance of staying true to my core. I had to let go of the past, not by erasing it, but by learning from its lessons. Each betrayal was a reminder that nothing in life is guaranteed, and every victory carries a bittersweet edge when it costs the people you love. In the days that followed, I chose to rebuild, not just my company but the parts of myself that betrayal had battered. I reached out to James, Sarah, and Olivia, and we sat together to map out a new path forward. Our talks were raw and open, diving into both the nuts and bolts of our next business steps and the emotional scars left by recent events. I listened as they shared their own stories of loss and letdown, and in that shared openness, I found a renewed sense of unity. It was clear that while we'd won the corporate fight, the road to healing was just beginning. I approached meetings with a fresh perspective, balancing the drive for growth with a sharp awareness of the personal costs behind every move. I made it a habit to check in with my team, fostering a space where trust could grow again, one conversation at a time. Slowly, the cold hallways of our offices started to feel warmer, not because betrayal's threat was gone, but because we were all dedicated to learning from our missteps. I even caught fleeting signs of regret in Emily's eyes during our brief run-ins, a hint that maybe she, too, was wrestling with the loss of what we'd once had. As weeks turned into months, I came to see that the real lesson wasn't about crushing an opponent but understanding that every win, no matter how sweet, comes with a price. I accepted that some wounds would never fully heal, and the scars of betrayal would always mark my journey. Embracing this truth gave me a new kind of strength, a resilience forged in struggle and shaped by reflection. I wasn't the same guy who'd once celebrated victories with pure joy. I'd become someone who'd seen ambition's dark side and learned to value integrity over fleeting success. In quiet moments before sleep, I often mulled over that final lesson. I knew that while I'd secured my empire, I'd also faced life's harder truths. Trust is fragile, love can slip away in the chase for power, and every choice leaves a lasting mark on your soul. This painful realization became the bedrock for my future. I vowed to move forward with more care, honoring both the wins and the losses, ensuring my legacy was not just one of profit but of hard-earned wisdom and the courage to face life's toughest challenges head-on. 6 months later, I stood in my office, the city's glow stretching out below like a promise kept. The empire I'd built was stronger than ever, with revenue up 60% and a future brighter with each passing day. I gazed at the sprawling skyline, feeling both the weight and the thrill of all I'd achieved. Every hurdle, every stab of betrayal, had led to this moment of reckoning and ultimate triumph. I hadn't just protected my legacy, I'd lifted it to heights that Emily and Ryan could only dream of reaching. The halls of my company now buzzed with quiet confidence. The grueling months after the boardroom showdown hadn't been easy. Every day was a fight, waged with hard data and sharper resolve. I'd revamped our strategies, forged stronger partnerships, and built a culture where hard work and loyalty were the only currencies that mattered. I saw the same determination in my employees' eyes. They'd chosen to stand by me, knowing what I'd built was worth every ounce of effort. James, Sarah, and Olivia stayed by my side, their steadfast support a constant reminder that true success is never a solo act. Their faith in my vision, even when others wavered, was the foundation on which I rebuilt both the company and the trust shattered by betrayal. Emily was gone, her exit as quiet as a fading whisper. I'd learned long ago that those who don't value commitment often end up left behind. She'd chosen a path of empty promises and fleeting thrills, and in doing so, lost everything that truly mattered. As for Ryan, his lofty schemes and reckless sabotage attempts were now just faded memories. He'd tried to play the savior with his shallow charm and untested ideas, only to be exposed as a fraud. His brief dip into the business world ended in a flop that collapsed within months, a sharp contrast to the empire I'd crafted through blood, sweat, and tears. In that final moment of victory, I realized revenge wasn't about tearing someone down, it was about reclaiming what was yours and proving nothing could break a determined spirit. I'd fought back not with spite but with unwavering dedication to excellence and a rock-solid belief in my own strength. I took a deep breath, thinking back to the countless sleepless nights, the tough negotiations, and every setback that had fueled my drive. Each memory was proof that every sacrifice was worth it, that every betrayal had only made me tougher. Looking around my office, I saw more than a financial empire. It was a symbol of my journey, marked by heartbreak and loss but also by growth, resilience, and an unrelenting pursuit of my dreams. I'd turned every moment of despair into a stepping stone, every obstacle into a chance to rise. The ultimate revenge wasn't about destruction, it was about building something lasting, a legacy rooted in hard work, integrity, and the knowledge that I could overcome any betrayal. Investors now saw me not just as a leader but as a beacon of grit and perseverance. Their trust wasn't luck, it was a testament to the power of steadfast determination against all odds. That night, as I locked up my office and stepped into the cool evening air, I felt a rare sense of closure. The city lights glimmered like a sea of realized dreams, each one a story of triumph born from challenge. I'd taken back everything that was threatened, not through blind anger but with calm, calculated precision. I knew my journey wasn't over. Each new day would bring fresh trials and doubts, but I carried a vital lesson: true victory lies in creating something enduring, in the courage to stand by your principles, no matter how deep the wounds. As I walked away from the building, I allowed myself a moment of quiet pride. I'd not only reclaimed my company and my future, I'd proven to myself that betrayal could be a catalyst for even greater heights. The ultimate triumph was complete, and with it, I'd secured a future where every setback was met with resilience, every loss a path to a bolder comeback. My heart still carried the scars of the past, but it also pulsed with the vibrant beat of a man who'd fought for his truth and come out on top. The game was over for those who tried to bring me down, and now, with my empire standing tall and unshakable, I could step into a new dawn of success and self-discovery. That's all for today's tale on Top Stories Hub. Hit subscribe, leave a comment, and tell me what you'd like to see next.